The only thing darker than your brackets getting busted is the fact that it was a Canes After Dark game on Thursday night. But hey, unlike your bracket getting busted, the Hurricanes winning streak, well, it stayed intact.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking anything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. Also do some AHL coverage over at the Calder Times. Also doing some baseball content over at Covering the Corner for SB Nation. And I'm the co-host of the Searchcast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a fun winning Friday episode as we get to recap the Hurricanes' 3-1 wins over the San Jose Sharks on Thursday night in their first game of the California road trip. We get to hear from Sean Walker in the post-game, get his thoughts after the team's win. And we also get to preview the Saturday game for your Carolina Hurricanes as they start their back-to-back over the weekend in Southern California against the LA Kings. But before we jump into all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And yeah, that was a very, very late game last night for the Carolina Hurricanes, starting at 10:30 on the East Coast, as the last Kings After Dark of the regular season. Hopefully we get some more, we'll hopefully get some later games in the Stanley Cup final, but this is the last game where they're starting super late. And I know it was really tough for a lot of people too, especially for me, because you're thinking, okay, it's 7:00, it should be too farther away, and then you realize you still have another 3.5 hours to wait for this game, and it's like, oh my goodness. But the thing on the line was for the Hurricanes, they were looking for the regular season sweep against the Sharks, beating them 3-2 back in Carolina. Well, they scored 3 again, this time in San Jose, but it was a very weird game, to say the least. It was probably one of the most Carolina Canes After Dark games that we've probably seen in a while, for the fact that the Hurricanes did give up a really weird shorthanded goal to the Sharks 13 minutes into the first period with William Eklund. I said, that's one of the guys to watch for the Sharks. Scores a very weird goal, somehow goes in past Andersen, but it was legal. So, unfortunately, the Hurricanes did get scored on their power play while going 0-for-3 in the process. So, didn't really help in that factor that you kind of lost the special teams battle in that sense, but you did shut out the Sharks in their power play. So, hey, the PK unit did their job. They went 3-for-3. Unfortunately, the power play unit didn't really do so high in that process. But all in all, I mean, hey, you win 3-1. You get goals from Seth Jarvis, his 27th of the season, still team leading. Sebastian Aho, did want him to get 2 faraway scores, his 26th of the season in the third period to make it 2-1. And then, of course, Sean Walker getting his 4th of the season, makes it 3-1, puts the game out of reach, and that's all she wrote for your Carolina Hurricanes. Jackson Blake did score, but unfortunately was called off the board for offsides. In a way, it stinks. It stinks for Blake because he's almost becoming the Jack Drury now of just getting almost all of his goals taken off the board, whether it's offsides, hand passes, weird circumstances of goaltender interference or whatever it is. So Jackson Blake, while having 11 goals in the season, could easily have 14, maybe 15 if it wasn't for some of these callbacks. So it stinks for Blake, but in the end, he did get an assist on the Aho goal. So makes up for it in that sense. Brent Burns gets an assist against his former team. And how about Taylor Hall? On a 4-game point streak, he is just absolutely having a really great run with the Canes. Probably one of the, I would say, in terms of looking back at that original trade on the 24th, he's probably been the most influential or most consistent new guy for the Hurricanes. And I know, Mark Jankowski unfortunately didn't go 5-for-5 in this game with his goal to shot ratio, but Jankowski's doing pretty well. But if we're looking over the longer extended process of more than just a week of games, obviously, it's going to be Taylor Hall who's probably been the most consistent Hurricane, and I'm still on the train that they need to extend him because Taylor Hall has just been playing great. Shane Gostisbehere is 31st assist on this season as well. I mean, have yourself a season, Shane Gostisbehere. You'd love to have him here. I'm glad that he's a Carolina Hurricane for their 2 seasons after this. And the fact that Sean Walker is here for another 4 years after this as well. He's fit into the system great. Having Walker Ghost together for the next few seasons, it's going to be a lot of fun with Slavin and Chatty and all that good stuff. But hey, the Hurricanes started really slow. You're down 1-0 after one. You had your chances 12-9. Unfortunately, didn't really work out in your favor. You got scored on by a very weird Canes after dark goal, but you basically turned it on, scored 3 unanswered, took care of business. You went home with the win. And the funny part was, too, the fact that the Sharks hit the Hurricanes 27-7. That's kind of a huge lopsided number. You think the Hurricanes will have a bit more of the hits, but hey, you know what? If you can't out-hit them, outscore them, and that's basically what the Canes did. And now you're looking at a team who's going into the weekend of a back-to-back against the Kings and the Ducks. You're sitting at 88 points. You're now 15-15-3 on the road. So, hey, you're doing pretty well for yourself. You're back to 500 on the road, which is what we want to see because you got to get ready for the playoffs, like I said on Thursday's show. You have to be ready to play on the road and get your power play going in the playoffs. At least the road records are looking good. Now you just got to work on the power play. But, 9-1 in their last 10 on an 8-game heater. You're giving yourself a good distance now because you have 2 games in hand on the New Jersey Devils, and now you're 8 points up on those guys with those games in hand. Plus, it doesn't help either. It doesn't hurt either the fact that you also have 41 plus 41 in the goal differential. So for the Hurricanes, hey, you know what? You're 27-7-1 at home. You're back to 500 at 15-15-3 on the road. You're 9-1 in your last 10. You're on an 8-game heater. And like I said, now you're 8 points up on the Devils with 2 games in hand. You're pretty much almost locking in the second spot in the division with 14 games to go, and you love to see it. And the thing, too, is when you look at the entire conference, the Carolina Hurricanes are second with a game in hand on the Panthers. So even if the Florida Panthers or the Toronto Maple Leafs or even the Tampa Bay Lightning go win the Atlantic Division, the Hurricanes, in terms of when it comes to the playoff seedings, they're technically second. So they would have home ice advantage. Outside of playing the Washington Capitals, they would have home ice advantage through the playoffs, and that's even including the Eastern Conference Final, depending on how that goes. So if they face Washington in the second round, yeah, they'd be the road team, but if they beat them and go to the Eastern Conference Final, and they're the second team in the East, well, there you go. You locked up home ice for the entire playoffs outside of one matchup. Because the Capitals did, yesterday did, win their game and punch their ticket to the playoffs. They're the first team to clinch a spot, 100 points, plus 73. You got to give them a lot of props. Game respects game. The Capitals surprised a lot of people this year. But, hey, for the Carolina Hurricanes, you got 14 games left. You're a point up on Florida, Toronto, and 3 points up on Tampa. You're putting yourself into a really good spot of locking in the second seed in the East. And I know they had the GM meetings, and unfortunately, Gary Bettman came out and said that he likes the playoff format of the divisions and all this other stuff. And of course he's going to like it. He was the one that came up with the rules. I just wish it'd go back to the 1v8 system because that's what made sense. It's a lot easier to see that because then you wouldn't have these weird matchups where you're having the second and third seeds playing in the same division playing against each other. And then you got the wild cards, instead of just doing the normal 7 versus 2 and stuff like that. Now they're getting a division winner instead of a team who's actually second. So if you look at the conference right now, what the 1 through 8 would be, it'd be Washington, Montreal, then it'd be Hurricanes, Senators, then it'd be Florida against New Jersey, then it's Toronto, Tampa. But now instead, you're looking at, Washington's probably going to take on Montreal. Then you're going to have Florida take on Ottawa, which I know a lot of people are happy for the Kachuk versus Kachuk. But then you got Kings, Devils, and then it's still Toronto, Tampa. But it's still a weird thing where it's like you're having the 2 against the 6 instead of the 2 against the 7 and stuff like that. So I understand why Bettman keeps trying to push for these divisional matchups because then you get all these different internal things. But I still think the 1-3-8 makes more sense, but that's besides the point. All that being said, the Hurricanes right now, second team in the East, they would have home ice advantage. They stay there. In terms of the entire NHL, they have the fourth most points. They are tied with Vegas, but with all, with a bunch of different head-to-head matchups and stuff like that, the Hurricanes are ahead of them. Only 2 back of Dallas. Winnipeg's at 100 points, just like Washington, but Washington's played 1 game less. But for the Hurricanes and where they're at now, especially how this game went against the Sharks, you're on an 8-game winning streak. You're 9-1 in your last 10. You're feeling pretty good. Your road record's back into 500. And now you take that momentum into the weekend against the Kings and the Ducks. But before we look into the Kings, we have to hear from Sean Walker in the postgame because he did score for the Hurricanes, getting their third goal, which put this game to rest. So stick around because here in a second we'll hear from Sean Walker getting his thoughts after the win on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
Did you know getting a good night's sleep is the #1 recipe for long-term success in life? I didn't. It took me way longer to realize than I'd like to admit. It was years of tossing and turning. I was always tired. I never felt like I could live up to my potential, but not anymore. Thanks to Bear Mattress. I used their sleep quiz and I matched with the Elite Hybrid. It's perfect for side sleepers like me. Now I wake up energized. I'm getting deeper sleeps and I'm ready to attack the day. No matter how you sleep, Bear Mattress has a match for you with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Like I said, we are going to hear from Sean Walker in the postgame from Thursday night's win. As the Hurricanes went 3-1, he did score the third goal in the third period. Putting the game away, gave the Hurricanes a win, helped them stay on their 8-game heater. So without further ado, let's hear from Sean Walker right now.
All right, Sean, this group extends its win streak to 8 games here tonight. Obviously, an important time to kick off this road trip. What were the main factors you saw in this one tonight?
Yeah, I think, we started pretty good in the first there, and then kind of some ebbs and flows of the game, got away from our system and what we want to do. But I think most of the night we just kind of stuck with it, eventually started doing what we want to do, and pucks went in for us. So just got to keep going with it here.
Well, you net one here tonight. Congratulations. I guess in that moment, what did you see to really want to rip that shot off?
Yeah, Halsey made a great play as a high-end player. So, we preach all the time just getting pucks to the net. That's really all I'm trying to do. And great net front by KK, and luckily it finds its way in.
Hall's such a fast player. He's not massive when it comes to his size, but seems to be really strong in the trenches in those situations leading to your goal. What have you noticed from his game in those senses?
Yeah, I think he's pretty big. So, he's tough to play against. Just a high-end player. He makes those plays every shift. So, he's been a great addition, and happy to be out there on the ice with him.
In these games like this where you're making this push and maybe it's not a 5-0 shutout in Philadelphia, but you're grinding through some of these situations, what have you noticed about the mentality of this group to keep this streak going?
Yeah, you're not going to have those nights every night where it's 5-0. So, again, some ebbs and flows there. You just got to stick with it, and that's going to be important going forward.
Big thank you to Sean Walker and the Carolina Hurricanes per usual for all of that. And yeah, you heard it from him. It's the fact that you look at the first period. Yeah, they played well. Kind of didn't really have their full 20 minutes in the first period. Did give up that weird goal to Eklund on the shorthand, but other than that, it was one of those things where it was the ebb and flow. They got back into it. They had 4 days off, which is really rare at the end of the season. Had a couple optional skates, so they're still trying to figure everything out. But once they got going, you saw in the second and third period, it was all Carolina from that point. It was just they needed to stand tall, do what they needed to do. Freddie Andersen played very well. Outside giving that one shorty, he stood on his head and did what he needed to do against the Sharks. And the Hurricanes, maybe played not a full 60 minutes, but I would say probably played about 55, maybe 50 minutes of Hurricanes hockey. And that's all that really mattered because they, got back into their flow, got back into the game. And that's how you saw them shut the Sharks down, even with, San Jose out hitting them by over 20 hits. But it's one of those things where, yeah, as many times they keep punching you in the mouth, it's just getting back up and do what you need to do. And that's what they did. They stuck to it. They got the goals they needed. And then you turn a, 1-0 deficit in the first period after a weird Canes after dark shorthanded goal to now you put up 3, you extend your streak, and Sean Walker gets a goal too. And, for him, it's just putting pucks on net. And luckily, good things happened and went in for him. And, if it got tipped in, great. If not, he got the goal. And that's what's really huge for him is the fact that he got his 4th of the season. And it was a way to maybe, put more pressure on the Sharks, but give the Canes a little bit more of a room to where they don't have to play super tight. But, they want to defend their 2-goal lead. But they don't have to worry about, if something goes wrong, then the game is going to be tight. So it's just sticking that with mentality, sticking with the system that works. And then you look at the team where they're at now. And like I said, you're putting yourself into a good spot with, you're on an 8-game winning streak. You're extending yourself past the Devils, even with games at hand now, which is very huge at this point of the season. Because with 14 games left, the more you keep piling up the wins, piling up the points, now you're distancing yourself from second even more. And now it looks like you're going to be locking in the second spot with no issues. It's now coming down to going and securing that 2 spot in the East, because you really want to have that home ice advantage the rest of the playoffs outside if you have to play Washington in the second round. But it's good to hear from other guys too, guys who are kind of newer in the system, but who've really bought in and, seen their game grow, especially like Walker. And, he understands what the Hurricanes need to do, why their system works. And that's why you see, teams like Philadelphia drafting him. Then he goes to goes over to Colorado and, it's just now he's in Carolina. So now, going to the Kings, then Philly, then Colorado and stuff like that. So you're, seeing why teams want him so much. And that's why the Hurricanes gave him that really good deal where it's like, yeah, you're still paying him under $4 million, but you got him locked up for 5 seasons. Then that's the reason, because of who Sean Walker is. So it's good to see that, you see how locked in he is and see how much he's grown within the system for the Hurricanes too. And just hearing from him in this post game talking about, yeah, they played their game. Maybe they, had some lulls here and there in the first period, but they, got locked in, shut it down the rest of the way. And then you saw 2 periods of them just, forcing their will on the Sharks. Now you go from, like I said, 1-0 down to winning 3-1. Now you get your winning streak extended and you're putting yourself in a good spot. And that's the one thing about this team is, like, I always talk about, you want to get hot at the right time. And I think this is the time really want to get hot, because yeah, you struggle, but if you struggle, okay, make it in like November, December. You did good in January. February was the greatest month, but now you've turned around in March and look where they're at now. So it's a long season. There's gonna be a lot of ups and downs. I mean, you're not gonna have, not every team is gonna be like the Jets and the Capitals where they're just gonna run away with it from wire to wire. It's just one of those things where, some parts of the season it might be a little bit of a struggle. Some things go, cold, some things reheat up, there's some changes to be made. And for the fact that even with all the distractions and the noise from January 24th to March 7th going on, yeah, that was, a long time to having to deal with a bunch of things. But now you look at the Hurricanes coming out of that, they were already went into the trade deadline with a 3-game winning streak, but now they've won the next 5 right after that. And is there signs of them slowing down? I'm not sure, because this is the first game in the last 5 where they didn't score 4 goals. But hey, you put 3 up on the Sharks. You did it after so much days of rest, and now you get 1 day off on Friday, and then you play a back-to-back over the weekend against the Kings and the Ducks. Then you're back home on Tuesday against Nashville. So you have a lot of hockey over the next few days as we're on a really huge sprint towards the final. But if this is where you get hot at the right time to set yourself for the playoffs, because last year the Hurricanes kind of, I wouldn't say limped in, but it was definitely the last 2 seasons. They were kind of on the heels of the Rangers, but then the losing Jesper Fast in the last game doesn't help. Then 2 seasons ago, you were on fire. Then Andrei Svechnikov gets hurt. You're kind of limping into the playoffs. This is probably right now, depending on how the last 14 games go, this could be setting up the Hurricanes for probably one of their strongest entries into the playoffs over the last few seasons, to where outside of limping in, outside of, you kind of know where you're at towards the end, but then you have some freak injuries happen very late. If everyone stays healthy and you stay hot, will they win the next 14? I'm not sure. But if you get at least 7 wins out of these next 14, which would be great too, because then you're really just setting yourself up. But let's say if you get 10 out of 14, if you win the next 10 of the 14 games, then you're really putting yourself in a good spot going into the playoffs. And like I said, this could be the strongest Hurricanes team on the strongest run going into the playoffs in a very long time. So it's definitely going to be exciting to see how that goes. And Sean Walker said it perfectly. It's, the team buying in, doing the right things that are necessary. And even when there's ups and downs, you find a way to lock it in and play your system, and it works. So that being said, they really need to be locked in against the LA Kings, because this is a very different team compared to the Sharks, and then you really need to come out of this one with the win if they want to keep this streak going. So stick around, as I will preview the Hurricanes at the Kings on Saturday here in a second on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that you lost an hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf at work, or trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it, especially after a Canes After Dark 10:30 start. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. Now, for me, I love all three of these flavors, so I would definitely get these ones. You can even build your own 12-pack or a 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery store or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said, the Carolina Hurricanes play the LA Kings on Saturday night for the first half of a back-to-back. This game will actually start at 4 p.m. Eastern, so thankfully it's not super late for the East Coasters. So this game will be a 1 o'clock afternoon matinee game in LA, but at least for us East Coast fans, the game is going to be at 4 o'clock. Your Carolina Hurricanes are 42-22-4, well above on a 20 games above 500 mark against the 37-21-9 LA Kings. Last time the two teams faced off, it was the first game of February where the Kings won 4-2, a very weird game where it's just there was no puck luck for the Kings in that one. But hopefully with how they want to do it on Sunday against the Ducks, this is going to hopefully be a revenge game for the Canes. In terms of the last 5 games, Mark Jankowski with 4 goals. Obviously, it would have been great if he went 5 for 5 on a shot percentage, but hey, you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. You gladly will take 4 for 4 at the time. Sebastian Aho leads the team with 5 points, and Shane Gostisbehere with 4 assists. On the flip side of the LA Kings, Kevin Fiala with 3 points, 2 of them assists, and then Quentin Byfield with 3 goals. Tells of the tape, it's another struggling power play against a struggling power play. The Hurricanes 27th at 17.9, while the Kings are 28th at 15.3. So it's basically bad on bad when it comes to the power play. So don't be surprised if it's another 2 for 2, 3 for 3 on both sides, as the Hurricanes are first in the penalty kill, still at 84.8%. While the Kings are 9th at 81.5. So you got 2 top 10 penalty kill units against probably the bottom 5, bottom whatever of the league at this point when it comes to the power play units are not that great. Goals for per game, the Hurricanes have that advantage at 3.24, which is 8th compared to the Kings, who are 22nd at 2.81. However, for goals allowed, the Canes are 5th at 2.6, but the Kings are at 2.54, which puts them 3rd. So you're talking about 2 teams who are top 5 in laying the fewest amount of goals in games. But luckily for the Canes, they do score a lot of goals. That 3.2, like I said, puts them in 8th. But the Kings are 22nd at 2.81, so they play a lot of close games. Over the last 10, Both of these teams are playing very strong hockey. The Kings are 6-3-1, just beating Chicago Blackhawks recently, but they did lose to Minnesota, which snapped their 5-game winning streak that saw them beat St. Louis, Vegas, the Islanders, Washington, and Nashville in overtime. Thankfully for the Canes, though, they are riding a 9-1-0 record in their last 10, winners of their last 8 against Calgary in overtime, then Detroit twice, Boston, Winnipeg, Tampa, Philadelphia, and the Sharks. Did beat Buffalo earlier in this 10-game stretch. Their only loss coming to the Edmonton Oilers, which was really 2-1, but a very late, under a second left in the game goal saw them lose 3-1. Either way, the Hurricanes are playing some phenomenal hockey as of late. Now, we saw Freddie Andersen go for the Canes against the San Jose Sharks, seeing his record jump up to 10-5-0 with a 208 goals against and a 915 save percentage with a shutout. But if we're going by the flipping of the goalie system, be expected to see Pyotr Kochetkov play against the LA Kings. He's 25-11-3, looking to keep his run to 30 going. He's got 2.37 goals against, a 908 save percentage with 2 shutouts. Now, depending on who the Kings went with in their last game against the Chicago Blackhawks, I would probably say don't be surprised if we see Darcy Kemper in this one. 23-9-7 with a 213 goals against, and 919 save percentage and 4 shutouts. He carries all 4 of the Kings' shutouts this season. Don't be surprised if we get a goalie-on-goalie matchup with the number of I would say probably the 1As of both teams. So it's going to be probably it'd be a Kemper-Kochetkov duel to see who can come in with the win for their teams. Now, players to watch, obviously Sebastian Aho for the Kings, 65 points. 26 goals on the season, but the guy I'm really keeping an eye on, Seth Jarvis. 27 goals, team leading in 61 games with 52 points. He's only 3 goals away from hitting 30 once again in back-to-back seasons, and only 8 points away from hitting 60 in back-to-back seasons. So definitely keep an eye out on those two. In the defense, obviously, got to keep an eye on Jacob Slavin. 23 points in 68 games, plus 19, only 3 back of Dmitry Orlov's plus 22. But for Slavin, you're talking about holding down Kemper, or not Kemper. You got Kempe, Kopitar, Byfield, Laferriere. Jacob Slavin's going to have his hands work cut out for him, but we all know he's the best defensive defenseman in the league for a reason. But the Kings do have a lot of shooters and a lot of guys that they keep an eye on. So he's definitely going to be relied upon to be that shutdown defenseman that the Hurricanes really need. And like I said, talking about the LA Kings, the guys you really got to keep an eye on in this one. Obviously, Adrian Kempe, 55 points, 28 goals. Anze Kopitar, 53 points, 16 goals. Even Kevin Fiala, 45 points, 25 goals. Those are the 3 really got to keep an eye on. But, hey, don't overlook Quentin Byfield, Warren Foegele, Philip Deneau. There's a lot of guys on this team who can put pucks on nets. So definitely keep an eye out for them. And also, watch out for Gavrikov, plus 16, along with Jordan Spence. Both of those guys are above 20 points. But Brent Clark, plus 8, 28 points, leads all defensemen. 103 blocks, 108 shots. This kid is not afraid to shoot and block pucks. He may not hit a lot of people, but he's someone to definitely keep an eye on for the Canes. I predicted this could be a game where they might lose in overtime to keep their point streak going, or they win to make it a 9-game winning streak. And I'm really hoping it's a 9 because it'd be really great to see them go into California, get 2 wins, play the Ducks on Sunday, and hopefully send themselves up for a 10-game heater. So definitely should be fun on Saturday for the Canes as they take on the Kings for a 4 p.m. Eastern puck drop, with it being 1 o'clock on the West Coast. But guys, that will wrap up the Friday edition of Locked On. Thank you for making this first listen today. Here's a listen. Check the Locked On NHL podcast and do the daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneShoeZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at TheZachary_Martin, where I have links in my bios to my link tree. We can find all my stuff in terms of the Hurricanes at thehockeywriters.com. AHL coverage is at thecaldertimes.com. If by chance you want to check out my baseball coverage covering the Cleveland Guardians, well, that's at coveringthecorner.com for SB Nation. If you by chance want to check out my other podcasts, well, it's the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For this show, well, it's Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio on the podcast side of things. Make sure to follow, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. In terms of YouTube, well, Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with all our Caniacs and become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed this Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend, and until next time, as always, let's go Canes.